Thanks everyone for being here. I always love telling everyone the story. I think it's a pretty exciting juncture for West Red Lake right now. So let's jump into it. Complicated story just in the fact that a lot of things are happening at the same time. And that means that I will definitely make forward-looking statements, enough that it takes 2 pages to disclaim my forward-lookingness. So West Red Lake came together, call it 2.5 years ago, when Frank Justra got together with Shane Williams. We all know who Frank is. If you don't know Shane, he has built mines around the world for 25 years, several with El Dorado in Greece, in Turkey, and in Quebec. And then he was with Skeena for quite some time. He previously was with Rio. He was with the Lundin Group. He's a mine builder through and through. And he got together with Frank, and they both had a vision that the gold market was going to get exciting. And they wanted to build a vehicle to give investors leverage to a rising gold market. And they agreed that the best way to provide leverage to a rising gold market is through aggressive production growth. That's been Frank's mantra. That's what he's done several times over, certainly to good success. And so they needed to find a foundational asset to start them on that path of aggressive growth. And they found that foundational asset in the Madson Mine. There's lots that I can say about the Madson Mine. So this is where the Madson Mine is. The project is just about in the middle of Canada on the western edge of Ontario. Everyone here probably knows Red Lake. Red Lake is a storied gold district, very high grade resources. 30 million ounces have been pulled out of the ground there. We have up to the northeast of us, our main project is that lower one, the lower red land package. That's the Madson Mine land package. The one that's up a little bit to the north is the Rowan property. That was part of the company before we acquired Madson. Also an interesting asset. Has a 300,000 ounce resource, averaging almost 13 grams per ton. Potential for that to be incorporated into our Madson Mine down the road. That one still requires permitting, so not a high focus for us right now, but something that we are progressing along in the background. But along strike to the northeast of us are the mines that made Goldcorp into the company that it is, right? The Campbell, Koshner, and Red Lake mines. Incredible discovery there of the high-grade zone, transformed the Red Lake mine from 50,000 ounces to 500,000 ounces of gold a year in a short period of time, and turned Goldcorp into the phenomenal company that it is. The rocks of Red Lake are wonderful. And that's a key reason that we wanted to get into this district. The Madson Mine. I'm sure there's familiarity in this crowd with the Madson Mine. I like to embrace the elephant in the room right off the bat because he or she is very, very present. This is a mine that failed 2 years ago this month. And so let's talk about that. Going a little bit farther back to start, the whole Red Lake district became what it is when gold was discovered roughly 100 years ago. Mines started being put into production in the 30s, including the Madson Mine, which ran then till the 70s. Some really good work. They pulled 2 million ounces of gold out of the Madson Mine, from rock averaging 9 grams per ton. They did some really great exploration work as well, drove drifts out to the side to look down deep, and discovered the 8 zone, which is in a slightly different rock package. It's in an ultramafic rock package, and its average grade is 2.5 times the grade in our Madson deposit. So Madson averages 7.4 grams per ton gold. That's our current resource. There's 1.7 million indicated ounces at 7.4 grams per ton. That 8 zone, it's a small resource. It's only 100,000 ounces, but it is 18 grams per ton. So very nice kicker of a resource down there, and geologically exactly analogous to that high-grade zone discovery that was over at the Red Lake mine that had that transformative effect. Not saying that that's what we have down there, but we're certainly going to see if we can find some more of the 8 zone. Going back to what I was supposed to be talking about there was the historical operation. The price of gold got too low. The mine shuttered in the 70s. A few other people did a few things over the decades. Then Pure Gold came on board. In their first, they owned it from 2015 to 2022. In the first half of that, they did 180,000 meters of drilling, which defined those 1.7 million ounces that I just referenced. So they did really good drilling work to define that resource. Then they engineered, they permitted, they financed, and they built, and they put this mine into commercial operations. Unfortunately, they didn't do a lot of drilling once the resource was defined. And that was the biggest misstep that happened with the pure gold story, because this is Red Lake. The rocks are wonderful and generous, but you have to work for it. So their drill spacing was too wide for them to know exactly where the gold was. The result of that is that they delivered material to the mill that averaged about 3.5 grams per ton, when their feasibility study had expected 8.5 grams per ton. So that clearly was not setting them up for success. Costs were also higher than the feasibility study had expected for several reasons, including there were some capital projects that maybe could or should have been done before operations that weren't, because they didn't have access to the capital to do those projects. Then there was also COVID, to be honest. It hit them in the face. Inflation really was a factor. And there was a bit of a scramble that happened between not having a good hold on where the gold was and the costs being much higher than expected. And so the whole thing, unfortunately, went into the bankruptcy proceedings after only 14 months. Very sad story for Pure Gold shareholders, absolutely. Turns out that that was our opportunity. The asset went to Sprott Resource Lending, who had provided a $150 million loan. They had senior security over the asset. Then there was a process, and we won the process. Pure Gold had invested $350 million in that project during their tenure. We bought it for $6.5 million cash, plus a 1% NSR, and a chunk of stock. Sprott Resource remains about a 19% shareholder in our company. And that's where we stand today. What did we buy? Well, we bought a fully permitted, mostly built operational gold mine in Red Lake, Ontario, with a shaft down to 1,275 meters. The old timers drove that shaft to access that really phenomenal 8 zone. 2 portals that access the mine, many, many, many kilometers of underground workings, and a mill that worked very well for Pure Gold. The mill was not one of the struggles that they had. It operated very well. We are really lucky for that. I would say that the replacement cost for that mill today is probably $400 million just to build the mill. So obviously an essential piece of infrastructure for us. And of course, permitted tailings facility alongside. So the elephant. What are we doing that's going to make Madson work when it failed only 2 years ago? Well, I said that our prior operators' missteps probably started when they stopped drilling. So the first thing that we did was start drilling. So in October of last year, we put our first underground drill rig into operation. In April, we added a second. We've now completed 45,000 meters of definition drilling, all into the resource. The goal is to define our first 2 years of mineable inventory and then to never stop drilling so that we always have a 2-year rolling stope book of inventory ready to mine. When we got this asset, the resource drill spacing was about 20 meters between holes into that mineral resource estimate. We are tightening it to 6 meters before we define stopes. So that, if you think about that in 3 dimensions and the amount of information that we're adding to that geologic model and that resource, it's dramatic. And that is fundamental. We believe that accuracy in defining where the gold is will be fundamental to mining success at Madson. You can see the progression on that stacking of images there. Pure Gold's initial resource was the blue ribbon, pretty consistent straight line ribbon. As they got underground in 2021, they were like, oh, that's not actually what it looks like. They redefined it to the purple ribbon, more that incorporated the folding, which was a good move. That purple ribbon is a pretty accurate capture of the mineral resource envelope. But without enough definition drilling into that ribbon, they were left to assume that the gold was consistently distributed along that ribbon, which it isn't. This is Red Lake. Gold is not consistent in Red Lake. It is in lenses along that ribbon. And so you step down, you see the drilling that we did into that ribbon, and the third image shows you red, the gold lenses that we are defining within that mineral resource envelope. Those red lenses are higher grade, we are finding in our internal calculations, than the resource average. Then we will apply a mining dilution factor to them, of course, because we are underground mining. And our goal is to deliver material to the mill that is roughly the resource estimate average, which obviously is the crux of it. We need to address their first key problem, which was not providing material to the mill that had enough gold in it. I could talk a lot about definition drilling. I will cut it a little bit short because this is only 15 minutes. The definition drilling, absolutely adding confidence and accuracy. You can see a lot of intercepts within the resource model. It's also extending the zones. We have a lot of near resource intercepts that are not included in the mineral resource estimate because there isn't quite enough, they aren't quite close enough. And so you can see there some nice purple intercepts that are extending a zone. So that's a bonus, so to speak, as we go through this process. Okay, if you want to get really technical, and I will get through this reasonably quickly, the other thing that we're doing is applying a very rigorous process requirements before we define stopes. So I said that you can't just mine the mineral resource estimate. This slide illustrates the process that we go through to progress from the life of mine mineral resource estimate, which is the top blue bubble, down to our stope book. So the first step is incorporating the numbers from the definition drilling program. That's a numerical addition of information. The next step is a manual addition of information from logging the core, from understanding the geologic model, and from chip samples from being underground. Then the third step is applying a confidence requirement, which we get from the geostatistical confidence matrix. Again, something we can talk about at length if you're interested. But this is the rigorous process that we're going through to define our stope book, which we also think is fundamental to mining success. We will only mine high confidence parts of our resource. Another key thing that we're doing to de-risk mining at Madson before we start is essentially we're practicing. So we started a test mining process only about 6, maybe 8 weeks ago now. There's a variety of environments underground at Madson. This is a place that's been mined several times. So resources that we have are in fresh rock, they're up against void stopes, they're up against loose backfilled stopes, they're up against cemented backfilled stopes. That's a bunch of different environments. We are going in and test mining in all of those environments so that we know ahead of time. So we find out ahead of time the safe and efficient ways of accessing that material. In addition, there's actually a 2-meter buffer around all of those historic stopes that's not included in the resource because nobody has demonstrated that it can be mined efficiently and safely. So hopefully we can also pull some more material into the resource by unlocking those 2-meter buffers. And we're making sorry, there's a beeping that you hear. It's just my blood sugar. It's fine. We're also pulling bulk samples. Test mining is creating bulk samples. We're batch stockpiling those, and when we restart our mill, we will process those off the cuff, and then we will be able to do reconciliation calculations. Again, the elephant. We need to talk about the elephant all the way through this process, and bulk sampling and reconciliation calculations are definitely part of that. I talked about maybe a lack of ability from our prior operator to do some of the capital projects that underpin efficient mining. The connection drift is a good example of that. They started mining at the east portal. They ran out of time and money to get into the heart of the ore body, so they switched plans and went over to the historic west portal so that they could mine McVeigh. That meant that they ended up with 2 portals that were disconnected. There's 2 sides of this mine that are not connected. The west portal is the one that taps most of the workings, but the west portal is small. You can only get 30-ton trucks into there. It's a steep and winding path, and you have to cross public roads to get to the mill. All of that is really inefficient for trucking, for size of truck, and you had to dump and reload your ore onto surface trucks to get across those public roads. We're driving this 1.2 kilometer connection drift so that we have a smooth, wider connection to the portal that's right beside the mill, and that can accommodate up to 60-ton trucks. Investment ahead of time to underpin an efficient operation. These are some of the other projects that we're doing for mining efficiency. We're installing a permanent primary crusher. The temporary installation nature of the primary crusher before was pretty problematic. They were using a loader to get things into there because the vibrator didn't work on the Grizzly, things like that. We're building a camp, we're building a maintenance shop, because if you want to talk about what kind of labor is hard to access in mining in Canada, it's really good mechanics. And if you build a good maintenance shop, you're much more likely to attract good mechanics than if you want them to work in the mud and the snow through the winter in Red Lake. We're putting evaporators in so that we can dewater more quickly. Dewatering is not a critical path item. Our mine plan that will come out in a few weeks is all above the 12 level, and we are dewatered to 14 at this point. But upside to make this asset bigger and better down the road comes at depth, so we want to dewater as quickly as we can to give ourselves that opportunity. We're building a camp, we're doing all kinds of things to ensure that we are set up as best we can for success. So I said that the mine plan is coming. There are some big catalysts ahead for West Red Lake. We need, and this is a conversation that we're having regularly, roughly another US $50 million to get ourselves into commercial operations. That is working capital through ramp up, that is corporate, that is a fully costed cost to complete. That's an internal number. We will issue our pre-feasibility study fairly soon, and that will be great to have out because the market doesn't actually know, because we haven't been able to issue a pre-feasibility study just because we've only been on the ground for a year and we've been working as fast as we can. The market doesn't really know exactly what this mine is going to look like, when it's going to happen, how much it's going to cost. We're very excited to put that study out to answer those questions, and we're very excited to demonstrate our access to capital by ideally putting that money in the bank so that in the near term, not only is the mine plan delineated, but we demonstrate that we have access to the capital to fulfill that mine plan. So that is all coming in the near term. I'm certainly happy to talk to anybody who might be interested in those catalysts as they play out. The investment thesis for West Red Lake. There's a short-term one and there's a long-term one. The short-term one is essentially over the next 18 months, and this is the classic golden runway, the re-rate, as you go from spending money to, certainly hopefully, making money by producing gold. We all know that it costs a lot of money to put a mine into production, even one that already had so much capital invested. We raised $100 million in our first year of operations, and I just said that we need to access another significant chunk of capital. Mine development is expensive. But once you get over that hurdle and start producing gold, that is the goal, and it usually generates a re-rate. That's the near-term investment thesis, and I think it is underpinned by the fact that there's very few new gold mines going into production in 2025, and the fact that we are in a rising gold market, and so a lot of investors understand that production growth in a rising gold market is a pretty good investment play. And a longer-term vision, Frank Giustra doesn't build single asset companies. That was never the plan from him and Shane. They want to build a mid-tier gold producer, and they want to do it in this gold market. That's a vision, but we certainly are a team with a network and deep mining experience and access to capital where we're going to do everything we can to turn that vision into a reality. So those are the two timelines of investment thesis. I could go on. There's lots more to say about what more Madson can become as we unlock other potential on the project, but I've already been talking for 15 minutes, so I'm going to go past the re-rate slides, my embracement of mining risk, more discussions of the high-grade zone and the new exploration targets that we have on the property, to end on the capital structure slide because that's what everyone always wants a presenter to end on. And with that, let me see if there are any questions. And if we can't get through them all here, I'm more than happy to chat outside of the room afterwards.
Great, thank you, Gwen. We do have a question here.
Yes, thanks, Gwen. How will the company raise the extra $50 million?
So we currently don't hold any debt. There's a very small gold-linked note debt that has a fairly long payout. So we have very limited debt at the moment. So the concept is to access about 2/3 of that with debt. And then the other third, we are advancing all of the options that you would think of for a company that's this close to production. So we're looking at equity, we're looking at convertible, we're looking at a stream, we're looking at gold prepay. Those are the kinds of things that you would expect this asset to be looking at, and we're advanced in all of those conversations. I'm certainly happy to chat with anybody else who would like to talk about that, but that's the plan.
Any additional questions?
I always know it's a good presentation when there's no questions, because clearly I just provided all the information you could possibly need. It's a complicated story. Please, let's chat outside afterwards if you do have any other questions. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thanks.